Tanya Washington looked at her watch as she walked through the busy airport terminal. She had 30 minutes before boarding started. Perfect timing. Not too early, not too late. Tanya always planned her travel carefully. As the founder and CEO of Washington Capital Partners, one of the most successful Black-owned investment firms in America, she knew the value of time. She adjusted her laptop bag on her shoulder and checked her boarding pass again. Gate B17, first class seat 3A. The flight would take her from Atlanta to San Francisco for an important tech conference. Tanya was scheduled to give the keynote speech about diversity in investment and how to create more opportunities for underrepresented groups in the finance world. Tanya wore a simple but elegant navy blue pantsuit with low heels. Her curly hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and she wore small pearl earrings that had belonged to her grandmother. At 42, Tanya had already built an impressive career. Her firm managed over $8 billion in investments. Big. Companies respected her opinion. Important people answered her calls. But today she was just another traveler trying to get to her destination. "Good afternoon, Ms. Washington," said the gate agent when Tanya presented her boarding pass. "We're happy to have you flying with us today. First-class passengers are now boarding." Tanya nodded and smiled as she walked down the jet bridge to the plane. A flight attendant greeted her at the door. "Welcome aboard. First class is to your right." Tanya found her seat easily. She placed her small carry-on in the overhead bin and kept her laptop bag with her. She sat down, fastened her seatbelt, and took out her phone to send a few last emails before takeoff. "Would you like something to drink before we take off?" asked a flight attendant named Kelly, according to her name tag. "Just water, please," Tanya replied with a smile. As other passengers boarded the plane, Tanya pulled out her laptop to review her presentation for tomorrow. The conference organizers had given her a 20-minute slot to talk about how her firm was changing the investment landscape by funding businesses owned by women and people of color. She was proud of this work. In the past 5 years, her firm had helped over 200 businesses get the money they needed to grow. Tanya was so focused on her work that she hardly noticed as the plane filled up. The seat next to her remained empty until just before the doors were about to close. A white man in a rumpled suit rushed on board looking stressed. "That's my seat," he said, pointing to the window seat next to Tanya. "Of course," Tanya said, standing to let him pass. She unplugged her laptop and moved it to make room. The man squeezed past her without saying thank you and dropped heavily into his seat. He smelled of cigarettes and cologne. Tanya returned to her work, but she could feel the man staring at her. She ignored it at first. As a black woman in finance, she was used to being looked at with curiosity or suspicion. It was annoying, but not unusual. "Are you sure you're in the right section?" the man finally asked, his voice just low enough that others couldn't hear. Tanya looked up from her screen. "Excuse me?" "This is first class," he said, as if explaining something to a child. "Yes, I know," Tanya replied calmly, though she felt her heart rate increase. "This is my seat." The man frowned and looked her up and down. "How did you get a first-class ticket?" Tanya took a deep breath. She had two choices. She could explain herself to this stranger who assumed she didn't belong here, or she could set a boundary. She chose the latter. "I paid for it just like you did," she said. "Now if you'll excuse me, I need to finish this work before takeoff." The man muttered something under his breath and turned to look out the window. Tanya returned to her laptop, but her concentration was broken. The familiar feeling of being out of place in spaces not designed for people who looked like her washed over her. But she pushed past it, as she had done countless times before. The flight attendant named Kelly came by again. "We're about to take off, ma'am. You'll need to stow your laptop." "Of course," Tanya said, saving her work and putting the laptop away. The plane prepared for takeoff. Tanya closed her eyes and took deep breaths. She had an important day tomorrow. She needed to stay focused. 20 minutes before takeoff, while the last passengers were boarding, Tanya noticed Kelly, the flight attendant, talking with another crew member and glancing in her direction. Then Kelly approached her seat again. "Ma'am, I need to speak with you," Kelly said, her voice now cold and professional. "Is something wrong?" Tanya asked. We've received a complaint that you've been disruptive, Kelly said. Tanya was confused. Disruptive? I've been sitting here working quietly. Nevertheless, we've received a complaint, Kelly repeated. The passenger next to you feels uncomfortable. Tanya looked at the man beside her, who was now staring straight ahead, avoiding eye contact. I don't understand, Tanya said, keeping her voice even. I haven't done anything disruptive. I've been working on my laptop until you asked me to put it away, which I did. Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to come with me to discuss this further, Kelly insisted. I'm not leaving my seat, Tanya said firmly. I have done nothing wrong. If there's something to discuss, we can discuss it here. Kelly's lips tightened. If you refuse to cooperate, I'll have to call security. A few nearby passengers were now watching the exchange. Tanya felt her cheeks grow warm with humiliation, but she kept her composure. Please explain what I've done. That's disruptive, Tanya requested again. Instead of answering, Kelly walked away and spoke into a phone at the front of the cabin. 5 minutes later, 2 airport security officers boarded the plane and approached Tanya's seat. Ma'am, we need you to come with us, said one officer, a tall white man with a buzz cut. Why? Tanya asked. I've done nothing wrong. The flight crew has the authority to remove any passenger, the second officer explained. You need to come with us now. Tanya looked around at the other passengers. Some looked away in embarrassment, others watched with curiosity. No one spoke up. May, I know the specific reason I'm being removed, Tanya asked. The crew cited passenger comfort and airline policy, the first officer said. Please gather your belongings. Tanya knew she had a choice to make. She could refuse and create a scene, or she could leave with dignity and fight this injustice later. With all eyes on her, she chose the latter. I want your names and badge numbers, she said to the officers, and I want this incident documented. She stood up, collected her laptop bag from under the seat, and retrieved her carry-on from the overhead bin. As she did, she noticed the man next to her looking down at his phone, pretending not to see what was happening. With her head held high, Tanya walked off the plane, followed by the security officers. The stares of the other passengers burned into her back. The humiliation was intense, but Tanya kept her face neutral. She had learned long ago not to show when she was hurt. In the terminal, Tanya asked for a supervisor and documented everything. Names, times, badge numbers. She took notes on her phone and asked for copies of all reports. We can book you on the next flight to San Francisco, an airline representative offered, clearly hoping to smooth things over. That won't be necessary, Tanya said coolly. I'll make my own arrangements. As she walked away, Tanya's mind was already working. She pulled out her phone and called her assistant. Linda, I need you to book me on a different airline to San Francisco tonight. And I need you to connect me with our legal team. Something happened that they need to hear about. This wasn't the first time Tanya had faced discrimination, but it would be the first time she had the power to do something about it. What the airline didn't know was that Washington Capital Partners owned a significant stake in their company, and Tanya Washington was about to show them exactly what that meant. Tanya Washington sat in her hotel room in Atlanta that evening. She had missed her chance to fly to San Francisco that day. All other flights were full or would arrive too late. Her assistant, Linda, had booked her on an early morning flight with a different airline. Tanya looked out the window at the city lights. She felt tired, but her mind was racing. The humiliation of being escorted off the plane in front of everyone still burned. She had built her career on staying calm under pressure, on using her brain instead of showing her emotions. Today tested those skills to their limits. She picked up her phone and called Sam Miller, the head of her legal team. Sam had worked with Tanya for 8 years. He understood both the law and the way Tanya liked to handle problems. Tell me everything, Sam said when he answered. Don't leave out any details. Tanya described what happened on the plane, how the man questioned her presence in first class, how the flight attendant claimed she was being disruptive when she had been sitting quietly, how security removed her without giving a real reason. This is textbook discrimination, Sam said when she finished. We have multiple legal options. But before we discuss those, I need to ask, what do you want to happen here, Tanya? Tanya thought for a moment. I want accountability, not just an apology to me. I want real change in how they treat people. Understood, Sam replied. I'll start working on this tonight. In the meantime, write down everything you remember while it's fresh. Names, times, exact words used. Everything. After hanging up, Tanya opened her laptop and wrote a detailed account of the incident. When she finished, she checked her email. The conference organizers in San Francisco were worried about her absence. She explained that she would arrive tomorrow and would still give her keynote speech as planned. Then Tanya did something she rarely did. She opened her social media account and wrote a post. Today I was removed from a flight for being disruptive. My disruption? Sitting quietly in my first-class seat, working on my laptop. I've spent my career opening doors for others. Today, I was shown that some doors are still firmly shut. More details to come. She added no airline name, no accusations, just facts. She pressed post and put her phone down. Tanya ordered room service and tried to focus on her presentation for tomorrow. But her phone kept buzzing with notifications. Her simple post was spreading quickly. By midnight, it had been shared thousands of times. People were adding comments about their own similar experiences. When Tanya woke up at 5 a.m. to catch her new flight, her post had gone viral. News websites were trying to contact her. Business leaders were sending messages of support. Civil rights organizations were reaching out. Her phone rang as she was getting dressed. It was Patrice Jones, her firm's public relations director. The airline released a statement, Patrice said. They expressed regret for any misunderstanding and promised to look into the matter. Standard corporate response. They're trying to make this go away quietly. That's not going to happen, Tanya said. Their stock dropped 3% in pre-market trading, Patrice added. Investors are nervous. Tanya wasn't surprised. Washington Capital Partners owned about 4.7% of the airline's stock. It was one of many transportation companies in their portfolio. That ownership gave her power but also responsibility. Let's talk strategy when I land in San Francisco, Tanya told Patrice. For now, say nothing more to the press. Let the airline dig its own hole. Tanya's flight to San Francisco was smooth. No one questioned her right to sit in first class. In fact, the crew was extra attentive, making her wonder if they knew who she was and what had happened. When she landed, a car was waiting to take her to her hotel. On the ride, Tanya called Danielle Carter, a prominent civil rights attorney she had worked with before. I saw your post, Danielle said. I've already received calls from 3 other people who had similar experiences with the same airline in the past 6 months. I want to talk to them, Tanya said. I thought you might. I'm sending you their contact information now. At the hotel, Tanya had 1 hour to freshen up before heading to the conference. She checked her emails and found one from Greg Peterson, the CEO of the airline. Ms. Washington, the email began. I was disturbed to learn about your experience on one of our flights. I would like to personally apologize and invite you to meet with me in private to discuss how we can make this right. Tanya read the email twice. The CEO wanted a private meeting. No witnesses, no record. A chance to smooth things over quietly, perhaps with some free tickets or an upgrade to their highest loyalty status. She wrote a quick reply. Mr. Peterson, I appreciate your outreach. However, I'm not interested in a private conversation. What happened to me happens to many travelers who don't have my platform. I propose instead a public forum where affected individuals can share their experiences directly with airline leadership. This would be more productive than addressing only my case. Tanya sent the email and prepared for her conference speech. She didn't expect Peterson to accept her proposal, but his response would tell her a lot about how serious he was about addressing the real problem. The tech conference was packed. Tanya gave her keynote speech about diversity in investment and received a standing ovation. Many people approached her afterward, not just about her speech but also about what had happened on the plane. Word had spread quickly. That evening, Tanya held a video call with her executive team. Her chief financial officer, Ben Howard, had prepared a report on all their transportation investments. The airline in question represents about $4 billion of our portfolio, Ben explained. It's been a solid performer, but not exceptional. There are other airlines with better growth potential and stronger diversity policies. Tanya nodded. Let's review those alternatives. I'm not making any decisions tonight, but I want options. After the call, Tanya checked her email again. CEO. Greg Peterson had responded to her proposal for a public forum. While we take your concerns seriously, a public forum could turn confrontational and unproductive. We would prefer to meet with a small group of representatives to discuss specific incidents and solutions. Tanya showed the email to Sam Miller, her lawyer, who had flown in to join her in San Francisco. Translation: We don't want public scrutiny of our practices, Sam said. They're worried about liability and bad publicity. And they should be, Tanya replied. I've spoken to 3 other people today who were removed from this airline's flights in circumstances similar to mine. All of them were black. All were accused of being disruptive when they weren't. Sam looked thoughtful. We could file a class action lawsuit. It would take years, but it would force them to release data on passenger removals. That data would likely show a pattern of discrimination. Years is too long, Tanya said. I want action now. She walked to the window of her hotel room and looked out at the San Francisco skyline. Tomorrow I'm calling an emergency meeting of our investment committee. You're thinking of divesting, Sam said. It wasn't a question. I'm thinking this airline needs to understand that discrimination isn't just morally wrong, Tanya said. It's bad business. That night, Tanya received another email from Greg Peterson. Ms. Washington, I understand your position. However, I hope you'll reconsider meeting privately first. There might be details of your experience that we could address immediately, while broader concerns could be handled through appropriate channels. Tanya didn't reply. The CEO still didn't get it. This wasn't about her personal experience anymore. It was about a system that needed to change, and Tanya Washington was about to use her power to make that happen. The next morning in San Francisco, Tanya Washington woke up early. Her phone showed dozens of missed calls and hundreds of new messages. Her story had spread even further overnight. News channels wanted interviews. Civil rights groups offered support. Other business leaders expressed outrage on her behalf. But Tanya wasn't focused on the attention. She was focused on action. She had called an emergency meeting of her investment committee for 7 a.m. at her hotel suite. As the members arrived, Tanya greeted each one personally. These were the people who helped her make major financial decisions for Washington Capital Partners. Thank you all for coming on such short notice, Tanya said once everyone was seated. I know some of you flew in just for this meeting. Marcus Bell, one of her senior advisors, spoke first. We've all seen the news, Tanya. How are you holding up? I'm fine, Tanya said. But this isn't about me. This is about a pattern of behavior that affects thousands of travelers every year. She showed them a presentation that her team had prepared overnight. It included data on the airline's history of passenger removals, testimonies from other travelers who had contacted her, and analysis of the company's diversity policies compared to other airlines. As you can see, Tanya explained, this isn't an isolated incident, and the airline's response has been inadequate. Their CEO wants to meet privately to smooth things over rather than address the real issues. Nicole Wright, the youngest member of the committee, asked the question everyone was thinking. Are you suggesting we divest? Tanya nodded. I am. We have always said that we invest in companies that reflect our values of dignity and equal treatment for all. This airline has shown they don't share those values. The room was quiet for a moment. Washington Capital Partners owned about $4 billion in airline stock. Selling it all would be a major move that would affect the market. Have you considered the financial implications? Asked Henry Porter, the most conservative member of the committee. This is one of our better performing transportation investments. I have, Tanya replied. Ben has prepared an analysis of alternative investments that align better with both our values and our financial goals. Ben Howard, her chief financial officer, distributed a report. There are several other airlines with stronger diversity records and similar or better growth potential. We could redistribute our investment across these companies with minimal financial impact. The committee members reviewed the report. They asked questions. They debated options. Some suggested a partial divestment or a gradual withdrawal. Others supported an immediate and complete separation. After an hour of discussion, Tanya called for a vote. The result was unanimous. Washington Capital Partners would sell all its holdings in the airline. "We'll announce our decision at market opening tomorrow," Tanya said. "That gives us time to prepare the legal documents and alert our major clients." As the meeting ended, Marcus Bell pulled Tanya aside. "This is a powerful move, Tanya. The airline stock will take a hit. Their board will be concerned." "Good," Tanya said. "Maybe now they'll take discrimination seriously." After the committee members left, Tanya called Patrice Jones, her PR director. "The decision is made. We're divesting completely. I need you to prepare a statement explaining why." "Should we mention your personal experience?" Patrice asked. "Yes, but make it clear this isn't about revenge. It's about accountability and our company values. And I want to include the stories of others who've had similar experiences, with their permission." While Patrice worked on the statement, Tanya met with Sam Miller, her lawyer, and Danielle Carter, the civil rights attorney. They had gathered statements from 15 people who reported being removed from the same airline's flights under questionable circumstances in the past year. 13 of them were black or brown. "This is a clear pattern," Danielle said. "And these are just the people who saw your post and reached out. There are likely many more." "We could file a class action lawsuit," Sam suggested again. "With this many plaintiffs, it would be strong." Tanya considered this. "Let's keep that option open. But first, let's see how the airline responds to our divestment. That might get their attention faster than a lawsuit." Throughout the day, Tanya attended conference sessions and met with potential business partners as planned. She didn't let the situation distract her from her work. But during breaks, she continued to coordinate the divestment plan with her team in Atlanta. That afternoon, she received another email from Greg Peterson, the airline's CEO. "Ms. Washington, I am concerned that we haven't been able to resolve this matter. Our preliminary investigation shows that proper procedures were followed in your case, though we regret any discomfort you experienced. I must emphasize the importance of handling this privately, rather than through media channels. Please reconsider my invitation to meet." Tanya showed the email to Sam and Danielle. "He still thinks this is just about me being uncomfortable," she said. "He doesn't see the bigger issue." "Or he doesn't want to see it," Danielle replied. "Companies often deny discrimination until they're forced to confront it." "Well, they'll be forced to confront it tomorrow," Tanya said. That evening, Tanya received an unusual call. It was from Rita Sanchez, a member of the airline's board of directors. "Ms. Washington," Rita said, "I'm calling unofficially. I've heard rumors that your firm is considering divesting from our airline. I wanted to reach out directly before any decisions are made." Tanya was surprised. Board members rarely contacted investors directly. "The decision has already been made, Ms. Sanchez. We will announce it tomorrow morning." There was a pause on the line. "I see. May I ask why? Is it related to your recent experience on one of our flights?" "It's related to a pattern of experiences, not just mine," Tanya explained, "and to your company's inadequate response to those experiences." "I understand," Rita said. "For what it's worth, not everyone on the board is satisfied with how this situation has been handled. Some of us believe more substantive action is needed." This caught Tanya's attention. "What kind of action?" "I can't say specifically right now, but there will be an emergency board meeting tomorrow after your announcement. Change may be coming faster than you think." After the call, Tanya wondered if Rita was just trying to delay the divestment, but something in her voice had sounded sincere. The next morning, Tanya woke up to news that another investment firm had announced it was reviewing its holdings in the airline. Word had leaked about Washington Capital Partners' plan, and others were following their lead. At precisely 9:30 a.m. Eastern Time, when the market opened, Washington Capital Partners released its statement. Washington Capital Partners is divesting its entire $4 billion stake in National Airways. This decision follows a documented pattern of discriminatory treatment of passengers, including our own CEO, Tanya Washington. We invest in companies that demonstrate respect and equal treatment for all people. When companies fail to uphold these values, we must withdraw our support. This is not about retribution. This is about accountability. The statement included quotes from several other travelers who had experienced similar treatment, with their permission. It ended with a challenge to other investors to consider whether their investments aligned with their values. Within minutes of the announcement, the airline's stock dropped 7%. Financial news channels broke into regular programming to report on the divestment. Other investment firms released statements saying they were reviewing their own holdings in the airline. By noon, the airline's stock was down 12%. Trading volume was 10 times normal. The market was reacting strongly to the news. At 1 p.m., Tanya received a text message from Rita Sanchez. Emergency board meeting in progress. We'll update you when possible. Tanya wondered what was happening in that meeting. Were they discussing how to stop the bleeding? Were they planning a stronger response? Or were they considering more fundamental changes? She didn't have to wonder long. At 3 p.m., just before the market closed, the airline released a statement of its own. The board of directors of National Airways announces that CEO Greg Peterson has resigned, effective immediately. Vanessa Martinez, former Federal Aviation Administration Deputy Director, has been appointed as interim CEO. The board has also authorized a comprehensive review of all passenger removal incidents in the past 3 years and a complete overhaul of crew training protocols. We are committed to ensuring that all passengers are treated with dignity and respect. The airline's stock, which had fallen as low as 15% down during the day, recovered slightly on the news. It closed at 11% below its previous day's value. Tanya read the statement twice. This was more than she had expected so quickly. The board had taken decisive action. Greg Peterson was out. A respected transportation official was in. And most importantly, they had committed to reviewing past incidents and changing their training. Her phone rang. It was Rita Sanchez again. Ms. Washington, Rita said, I thought you should know that your actions today have created a seismic shift in our company. Sometimes it takes an outside force to make necessary changes. We have a long way to go, but we've taken the first step. Tanya nodded, though Rita couldn't see her. It's a good first step, she agreed. But you're right, there's a long way to go. 1 week after the airline announced its CEO's resignation, Tanya Washington returned to her office in Atlanta. The story had dominated business news for days. Other investment firms had followed her lead, though none had pulled out entirely like Washington Capital Partners. The airline's stock had stabilized but remained down 8% from where it was before the incident. Tanya's assistant Linda brought in a stack of messages. These all came in while you were in meetings this morning, she said. The phone hasn't stopped ringing. Tanya looked through the messages. Business leaders wanting to discuss diversity initiatives, news shows requesting interviews, civil rights organizations seeking partnerships. The story had turned Tanya from a respected but relatively private financial executive into a public figure. Also, Linda added, Vanessa Martinez, the new interim CEO of the airline, has called 3 times. She's very eager to speak with you. Tanya nodded. Set up a call for this afternoon. Later that day, Tanya sat at her desk and dialed Vanessa Martinez's number. She didn't know what to expect from this conversation. Would Martinez try to convince her to reinvest? Would she make excuses for what had happened? Ms. Washington, thank you for calling, Martinez said when she answered. Her voice was warm but professional. I've been hoping to speak with you directly. I'm listening, Tanya replied. First, I want to personally apologize for what happened to you on our flight, Martinez said. It was unacceptable, and it reflects deeper problems in our company culture that I'm committed to fixing. Tanya appreciated the direct acknowledgement. Thank you, but as I've said before, this isn't just about me. I understand that completely, Martinez agreed, which is why I'm calling. We've begun our review of past passenger removal incidents, and the preliminary findings are troubling. There's a clear pattern that suggests bias in how our crews handle passenger complaints. This wasn't news to Tanya. but she was surprised by Martinez's openness about it. The previous CEO had denied any pattern existed. "What do you plan to do about it?" Tanya asked. "I've already taken several steps," Martinez explained. "We've suspended the specific policies that were used to remove you and others unfairly. We're developing new training programs for all customer-facing staff, with input from civil rights experts. And we're creating an independent review board to handle passenger complaints." These were substantive changes, not just empty promises. Tanya was impressed but still cautious. "Those sound like positive steps," she said. "But changing a company culture takes more than new policies. It takes consistent leadership and accountability." "I agree," Martinez said. "Which is why I'd like to invite you to serve on a newly formed passenger advocacy board. This board will have real power to review incidents, recommend changes, and hold us accountable. Your experience both as a passenger and as a business leader would be invaluable." Tanya hadn't expected this. The airline wasn't just trying to win back her investment. They were asking for her help to transform their company. "That's an interesting proposal," Tanya said carefully. "I'll need to think about it." "Of course," Martinez replied. "Take all the time you need, but I hope you'll consider it. Sometimes change happens faster when you work from the inside." After the call, Tanya sat, quietly, thinking about Martinez's offer. Serving on the board would give her influence over how the airline changed, but it might also look like she was too easily won over. She called Sam Miller, her lawyer, to get his perspective. "It's a smart move on their part," Sam said after Tanya explained the offer. "They get your expertise and show they're serious about change, but you need to be careful about the terms. If this board doesn't have real power, it could just be for show. That's what I'm worried about," Tanya admitted. Later that afternoon, Tanya met with her executive team to discuss the airline situation. She shared Martinez's offer and asked for their thoughts. "I think you should do it," said Ben Howard, her CFO. "But with conditions. Make it clear that our reinvestment would depend on real progress, not just promises." Nicole Wright, who handled many of their diversity initiatives, agreed. This could be a chance to create a model for how companies should handle these issues. Other airlines might follow their lead. Marcus Bell was more cautious. "We need to be careful not to seem like we're backing down. Our divestment made a powerful statement. Joining their board so quickly might weaken that message." Tanya considered all these perspectives. She was leaning toward accepting Martinez's offer, but with clear conditions. She wanted the Passenger Advocacy Board to have real authority, not just advisory power, and she wanted Washington Capital Partners to remain divested from the airline until they saw concrete evidence of change. The next day, Tanya called Vanessa Martinez back. "I've thought about your offer," Tanya said. "I'm willing to serve on the Passenger Advocacy Board, but I have some conditions." "I'm listening," Martinez replied. "First, the board must have real authority to review cases and recommend changes, with a commitment from the airline to implement those recommendations. Second, it needs to include people from diverse backgrounds, including some who have experienced discrimination on your flights. And third, my firm will not reinvest in your airline until we see measurable progress over at least 6 months. There was a pause on the line. Tanya wondered if her conditions were too demanding. "Those are reasonable terms," Martinez finally said. "I'll need to get board approval for the authority piece, but I believe they'll support it. They understand that this is a critical moment for our company." Over the next month, Tanya worked with Martinez and the airline's legal team to structure the new Passenger Advocacy Board. They recruited a diverse group of members, including civil rights lawyers, travel industry experts, and people who had experienced discrimination while traveling. The airline's board of directors approved giving the Advocacy Board real power to review incidents and require changes to policies and training. This was unusual in the industry, where such boards typically only made suggestions that companies could ignore. Meanwhile, Martinez was making other changes. She fired 2 executives who had defended the previous policies. She hired a new head of training with a background in diversity and inclusion, and she began a complete review of how flight crews were taught to handle passenger issues. 3 months after the incident, Tanya attended the first meeting of the Passenger Advocacy Board at the airline's headquarters. As she walked through, The building, she noticed posters announcing the company's new values, with respect for all passengers at the top of the list. The meeting began with a presentation of data from the review of past passenger removals. The numbers confirmed what Tanya had suspected. Black passengers were 3 times more likely to be removed from flights than white passengers, even when the reported disruptive behavior was similar. This is exactly why this board is necessary, Tanya said after seeing the data. These numbers tell a clear story of bias, whether conscious or unconscious. The other board members nodded in agreement. They spent the rest of the day reviewing specific cases and recommending changes to prevent similar incidents in the future. After the meeting, Vanessa Martinez asked Tanya to stay for a private conversation. "I want to thank you," Martinez said, when they were alone. "Your actions forced our company to confront problems we'd been ignoring for years. It's been painful, but necessary." "Change usually is," Tanya replied. "Our stock price is still down," Martinez admitted. "Some shareholders are nervous about all these changes. They worry we're spending too much time and money on this issue. They should be more worried about what happens if you don't address it," Tanya said. "Trust is hard to build and easy to lose. You're rebuilding trust, not just with me, but with all the passengers who felt mistreated or unwelcome." Martinez nodded. "That's what I tell the board. This isn't just about avoiding bad publicity or lawsuits. It's about what kind of company we want to be." As Tanya left the airline's headquarters that evening, she reflected on how much had changed in just 3 months. One terrible experience had led to meaningful reforms that would help thousands of travelers. Her financial power had opened doors that might otherwise have remained closed. On the flight back to Atlanta, on a different airline, Tanya thought about what she would tell her investment committee at their next meeting. Washington Capital Partners had stuck to its principles by divesting from the airline, but principles also meant recognizing genuine efforts to change. Perhaps in a few more months, if the airline continued on its current path, they might consider reinvesting, not because they had forgotten what happened, but because they believed in supporting companies that were truly committed to equality and respect for all people. Tanya looked out the window at the clouds below. Sometimes power came from walking away from a table, and sometimes it came from returning to that table, but on your own terms. 1 year had passed since Tanya Washington was removed from the flight. In that year, many things had changed. The airline had transformed its policies, training, and culture. Vanessa Martinez, originally hired as interim CEO, had been given the permanent position after the board saw the positive changes she was making. Tanya sat in her office in Atlanta, reviewing the latest report from the Passenger Advocacy Board she had helped create. The numbers were encouraging. Passenger removals had decreased by 60% overall. More importantly, the racial disparities in those removals had nearly disappeared. Black and brown passengers were no longer being targeted unfairly. Linda, her assistant, knocked on the door. "The car is here to take you to the airport," she said. Tanya nodded and gathered her things. Today was an important day. The airline was holding its annual leadership conference, and Tanya had been invited to speak. It would be her first time flying with them since the incident. On the drive to the airport, Tanya thought about what she would say to the airline's executives and managers. She had prepared a speech, but she was still refining it in her mind. This wasn't just another business presentation. This was personal. At the airport, Tanya noticed the changes immediately. The airline's staff seemed more attentive to all passengers. The gate agents made eye contact and smiled genuinely. The boarding process was more organized and respectful. Small changes, but they mattered. When Tanya boarded the plane, a flight attendant named Robert greeted her warmly. "Welcome aboard, Ms. Washington. It's an honor to have you flying with us today." Tanya smiled and thanked him. She didn't know if Robert recognized her from the news or if he was just being professional. Either way, his greeting felt sincere. As she settled into her first-class seat, Tanya remembered sitting in a similar seat a year ago, before the incident that changed everything. She had been focused on her work then, not expecting trouble. Today she felt both wary and hopeful. The flight was smooth. The crew was professional and friendly to everyone. Tanya watched carefully as they interacted with a diverse group of passengers. She saw no signs of the bias she had experienced a year ago. When the plane landed, Vanessa Martinez was waiting at the gate. The two women had worked closely together over the past year but had developed more than just a professional relationship. They had become allies in the effort to create real change. "Welcome," Martinez said, giving Tanya a warm handshake. "Thank you for coming. Your speech means a lot to us." "I'm curious to see how it will be received," Tanya replied. "Some will be more receptive than others," Martinez admitted. "Change is still hard for some of our old-timers, but most people have embraced it." They rode together to the hotel where the conference was being held. On the way, Martinez updated Tanya on the company's latest initiatives. "We've expanded the training program you helped design," she said. "Now all new hires go through a full week of diversity and inclusion training before they start any other training. And we've made it part of our regular refresher courses for existing staff." Tanya nodded approvingly. "How's the mentorship program going?" "Very well. We've paired 50 employees from underrepresented groups with senior leaders. Several have already been promoted, and we're seeing more diverse candidates applying for jobs at all levels." These were the kinds of concrete changes Tanya had hoped to see. Not just talk, but action. Not just policies on paper, but real shifts in how people were treated. At the hotel, Tanya checked into her room and prepared for her speech. She was scheduled to address the conference that afternoon. She reviewed her notes one more time, making small adjustments. She wanted to be firm but not accusatory, hopeful but not naive. When it was time, Tanya walked into the conference hall. Hundreds of airline employees, from frontline workers to executives, filled the room. There was a hushed moment as she approached the stage. Everyone knew who she was and what had happened to her. Vanessa Martinez introduced her with respect and gratitude. "Tanya Washington could have simply been an angry customer. She could have sued us and moved on. Instead, she chose to help us become better. Please welcome the founder and CEO of Washington Capital Partners and a true catalyst for change, Tanya Washington." The audience applauded politely as Tanya took the stage. She looked out at the sea of faces, so many different backgrounds and experiences represented. She took a deep breath and began. "1 year ago, I was removed from one of your flights for being disruptive. My disruption was simply existing in a space where someone didn't think I belonged." She paused, letting her words sink in. "What happened next could have gone many ways. I could have sued. Your company could have denied any wrongdoing. We could have spent years in court." Tanya looked around the room, making eye contact with several people before continuing. "Instead, something unexpected happened. My company withdrew our investment. Your board took decisive action, and together we began a process of transformation that has made your airline stronger, fairer, and more successful." She showed a slide with the company's stock price over the past year. After the initial drop following her divestment, it had slowly recovered. In the past 3 months, it had actually climbed higher than it was before the incident. "This graph tells an important story," Tanya said. "It shows that doing the right thing isn't just morally correct, it's good business. Passengers notice how they're treated. They notice when a company takes responsibility and makes real changes." Tanya went on to highlight the specific improvements the airline had made: the new training programs, the more diverse hiring practices, the passenger advocacy board, and the dramatic reduction in unfair passenger removals. "These changes didn't happen because one black woman was mistreated," she emphasized. "They happened because that mistreatment was part of a pattern, and because when that pattern was exposed, your leadership chose to address it rather than deny it." She looked directly at Vanessa Martinez, acknowledging her courage in taking on such difficult changes. "Change is never easy," Tanya continued. "I know some of you resisted these new policies. Some of you felt accused or defensive. Some of you worried that paying attention to these issues would distract from your real work of running an airline." She paused again, her gaze sweeping across the room. "But look at the results. Passenger satisfaction is up. Employee retention is up. Your stock price is up. And complaints about discrimination are down dramatically. It turns out that treating people with dignity and respect isn't a distraction from your real work. It is your real work. The room was completely silent. Tanya could feel the weight of her words settling on the audience. I'm here today to tell you that last week, Washington Capital Partners reinvested in your airline. Not because we've forgotten what happened, but because we believe in supporting companies that are truly committed to change. A murmur went through the crowd. This was news to most of them. Our investment is smaller than before, just $1 billion to start, but it represents our belief in the path you've chosen. We'll be watching closely to make sure you continue on that path. Tanya closed her speech by looking toward the future. What happened to me a year ago was painful, but what you've done since then gives me hope. Not just for your airline, but for what other companies might learn from your example. Sometimes, it takes a crisis to create change. But once that change begins, it can transform an entire culture. When she finished speaking, there was a moment of silence. Then someone started to applaud. Others joined in. Soon the entire room was on their feet, giving her a standing ovation. It wasn't just politeness. Tanya could see genuine emotion on many faces. After the speech, dozens of employees came to speak with her. Some shared their own experiences of discrimination, either as employees or as passengers. Others thanked her for pushing the company to be better. A few even apologized, though they had nothing to do with what happened to her. That evening, Vanessa Martinez hosted a small dinner for Tanya and key members of the airline's leadership team. As they ate, they discussed next steps for the company's transformation. We've made good progress, Martinez said, but we can't get complacent. This has to be ongoing work, not a one-time fix. Tanya agreed. The real test is what happens when the spotlight moves on. When no one's watching, will you still do the right thing? That's when it matters most, Martinez replied. That's when we show who we really are. As Tanya flew home the next day, she reflected on the journey of the past year. One terrible experience had led to unexpected change. Her financial power had opened doors, but it was the human connections, the stories shared, the honest conversations, the willingness to listen and learn that had created lasting transformation. The flight attendant who served her coffee smiled, genuinely. The pilot thanked passengers personally as they deplaned. Small things, but they reflected a larger shift in culture. Tanya Washington had pulled $4 billion in funding from an airline that treated her with disrespect. But more importantly, she had helped create a company where such disrespect was no longer acceptable. That was the real power of her position, not just to punish bad behavior, but to encourage and reward positive change. As she left the airport, Tanya knew that the work wasn't finished. It never would be. But today, at least, she could fly without fear of being told she didn't belong.